6:30, our regular meeting. I will note that the same members are still present from our prior meeting, and we will turn to presentations.
I would like Jessica Goodman, who's the regional manager for the Santa Cruz City Libraries, and she's going to be working with, and has been working with, Ann and Deb, developing our local history programs and services, and I think you'll be really impressed. This is something that's very popular in our community.
You have copies of some of our marketing materials that show you the local history resources that the library offers, the genealogy resources that our Genealogical Society offers, and the card for our Spring Local History Program series, which is taking place across the county and has been extremely popular. So I just want to introduce Deborah Ljpa, who's the librarian who handles our local history collections, local history research, the local history database, and is the one who's designed the program series and worked with researchers across the county to deliver it. Ann Young, who designs the website and the local history database. And then when they're finished, Dancy Giroux from the Genealogical Society will talk about their resources.
Well, I think we're going to have a little show and tell. This I thought would be the best way to give you an idea of the kind of resources here at the library and also the kind of questions that we get asked. So I'm going to go through a few of the recent questions and then show you some of the things, some of the sources that we've used to answer those questions. And I'm going to start with one that just came up very recently, last few weeks. There was a producer for the Ghost Hunters TV show email to ask what sort of paranormal activity has been going around in Santa Cruz. Where do you begin, right? So he wanted to, send it to the city council. He wanted some ideas for the Ghost Hunters show. So there are books: Supernatural Santa Cruz, Haunted Santa Cruz, and a whole book on the Haunted Oakdale Lodge. So that was a good place to start, to show them those things. And then another source that we have that we use very often is called a clipping file. That for the last, say, 50 years, librarians have been clipping articles out of the newspapers, out of magazines and other papers around the area, or just miscellaneous things. So not only just Santa Cruz papers, but here's an article from the San Francisco Chronicle back in the 70s, and one from Scotts Valley Banner on old Santa Cruz haunts. So these are the kind of things that are now being scanned, digitized, and added to the local history database, which Ann will talk about later. But that's a way that we can easily, when we get those questions, we can easily just say, look at the database, or give them copies of these things. And not only old things, but there's still, as Jessica mentioned, interest in local history is really high. And every issue of the Santa Cruz Style magazine, which you've probably seen around, that comes out every few months, they always have at least one article on local history. So what I've been doing is going through these, scanning them, and adding them to the database. So these will always be there. And again, Mysterious Manifestations of Santa Cruz. This was from 2014. So again, this is something that we can show them and offer online for people. So another question that we had when I was looking through things was from a producer for the recent PBS documentary on Reconstruction. This came in last fall, and as I was looking through questions to bring, I was, this is very current, because there was just last month a PBS documentary on the Reconstruction with Henry Louis Gates. And they had contacted the library last year because they had heard that there was a lynching in Santa Cruz, and they wanted, see if I could find a picture. There was an article, there's a photo going around on the internet of a hanging on Water Street Bridge. And they wanted to see, I'm going to pass some things around. There's an example of the picture. It's rather grim. And then what we have now are articles, again, on the database that are written by local historians that we put packaged into a nice format with the library's logo and that kind of thing too, then that we can download and send to anybody who asks. So that was a really nice example of what the photo was and some background history for that producer. And speaking of TV shows. There was another one that came in last year from the BBC, and they were doing their Great American Railway Journeys. And they were looking into the railroads at Roaring Camp to do a special on those railways. So, of course, there's a book on Roaring Camp railroads that we could, let them know about. And another source that we use for that are some research materials that have been donated over the last maybe 100 years from local historians that have given us their material. And some of those have been postcards. So we've got some postcards here on Roaring Camp, which I'll just pass around if you like. And then I pulled out a few more just of photos from San Lorenzo Valley of, but this is an example. We have over about 650 postcards, and they're really good for doing research because the images are really clear. There's usually a caption on them. And then again, all of those are also now on the website. But we don't get questions just from TV producers. We also work with local government agencies. And one of the ones that I had last year was a question from a county planner, because if you might remember, there was a controversy about a gate at Opal Cliffs that was being locked, and it was a question of why is that gate closed and what should be done about that. So this planner wanted some background history about the Opal Cliffs area and the recreation district. So one of the things that we could use was were the old newspapers. And we have those on microfilm. And there's also a database called newspapers.com, which is very helpful for finding articles quickly. But not everything is in newspapers.com. So what we did is we made I'll just show you some photocopies. This is an example from 1936 when the Opal Cliffs opened. And it gives you some idea of the prices. Everybody likes to know how much things cost back in 1936. Here's one. Here's an article too. And this was really nice because this was like a concise history of Opal Cliffs area. And there's one about he's getting ready his $20,000 home, which probably was a lot of money back in 1930, I would think. Or this was 1950s actually for this article. But again, this is something that we collect, and you never know what kind of questions you're going to be asked. And then a couple other things that we use for that kind of a question is the library collects government documents, which are extremely useful. These are, this is a draft EIR for East Cliff. And if you're not familiar really with EIRs, there's lots of historical information here. There's information about recreation in the area and about just all, the resources. So again, I won't pass this around because it's just an EIR. Again, we have a whole collection of these in storage for mostly, the county and the city of Santa Cruz. Another thing I will pass around though is something that we use, and it's useful for questions like, the area and houses, and is our old maps. This one is it's a 1913 map that was like reprinted in 1915. So it's quite old, but it's in great shape. And again, that's just a map of the city of Santa Cruz. We have collections of maps, and those are also in the process of being scanned, and they're now added to the database. So it's nice to look at the originals, but if someone's doing research, they can always just get a snapshot of what it's like online, and then we can show them the original resource. So another question that we had recently that I thought was kind of interesting was a reporter for the San Francisco Chronicle wanted to know why rock music was banned in the city of Santa Cruz. Can you imagine, right? No. So there's a book called Notes from Santa Cruz, the county's music history. So I'm showing you this as an example of odd things that people write about that are really available nowhere else. I mean, it's like, who else is going to collect a book on the history of the music in Santa Cruz? So we found articles in newspapers about why it was in, I'll pass this around to 1956, why they temporarily banned rock and roll. And then as it turns out, in 1912, they also banned ragging, which was music done to ragtime music. So again, a source that this is why the library is kind of special, because no one else is going to have these. And eventually the Chronicle reporter did write an article about why music was banned for like a day in Santa Cruz. We get a lot of requests for photographs, which the library has a collection online now of about 2,500 photos. And I'll give you a couple of examples of how we use those. Last fall, when the Monterey Bay Community Power was opening their new offices down in Monterey, they contacted the library because they wanted about a dozen photos of areas around Santa Cruz County that would be representative of the county, that they would enlarge and hang on their walls as their artwork. So I worked with someone down there to select some photos that were good quality, that would be able to be enlarged, and also that would be good examples of what's available. So I'll pass around a few photos. I think they all have captions. They're pretty obvious what they are. There's the Watsonville Airport, the Boardwalk, the Capitola Begonia Festival, and a Felton-covered bridge. So I thought that was a really nice service that the library could offer, is that they could, give them high quality resolution copies of these, and then they're using them in their offices. We also get questions and requests from authors who are writing books. And I've been working with an author recently. She's writing a book on the history of Henry Cow Redwood State Park. So she found some images through the website and then wanted to get permission to actually get the originals, scan them, and then use them in her book. So I'll pass around a few photos. One I found that she's using, that was really interesting, is there's a picture you'll see in the middle. It's Andrew Carnegie, and he's at a picnic in Henry Cow Park outside. I don't know why. And then you'll see the captions, I think, are self-explanatory. So that's also a good resource. And then the photos, again, are really popular. And I think is a reason why, as Anne will talk in a few minutes, about why the database gets so many visits. Now I'll close with one of my favorite questions that came out not too long ago. There was a collector of postcards, and he had a postcard of a submarine in the bay in front of the boardwalk. And he figured it was about between 1910 and 1920. He wanted to know what kind of submarine it was and why it was in the bay. So that was a fun one because I actually could answer it. I mean, it took a little while. But there was a photo I found in the database of a submarine, an F-2 submarine, in the Port Watsonville in 1912, and a little bit of information about the submarine. And it was down there there's an Apple annual down in Watsonville. It was like an annual pageant, and the submarine was there. So somehow doing some more digging, I did find, again, this is from a resource of things that just these collections of material that researchers have left for us. It's the Marine Pageant of 1912 in Santa Cruz. And this Marine Pageant then, in the program listing, it shows that there were U.S. warships and submarines that came to visit in the bay that day as part of the pageant. So I'll pass that around. That's again from 1912. And just to finish, here's another photo that I found with that. It's the queen of the pageant, Clara Walty, and her court. So I want to end with this, that you never know what kinds of questions you're going to get. And it might seem strange to be adding these things, but it really is effective, and it's a lot of fun. So thank you for letting me share with that.
One of the things we've been working on this year is our collection development plan. So it's really, what do we collect and why? We really aren't an archive per se. We're more of a popular lending collection. But we looked for where is it our comparative advantage to be an archive, to really hold a historical collection. And I think with the demand for local history, we decided that local history is the place to have a Santa Cruz Public Library hold a collection. And in part it's interesting because many communities have thriving historical societies, and this is a community that doesn't necessarily have that county historical society. There's a lot of more local groups, and so I think we play a really important role in the historical work of the community. Well, one of the things we've been talking about is accessibility to the archive, because we have amazing resources. And Ann Young's done some incredible work on how we can make these resources more accessible. Jessica, do you want to say anything more?
No, I covered it.
Ann?
Yeah, so I've got to stand back here by the piano. I wanted to be on the piano, but that wouldn't really be appropriate. So anyway, I'm going to just start off where Deborah ended and just talk about how working on local history has really been, for me, one of the most fun projects I've done in my time here at the library for a whole bunch of reasons. One of them being, you just never know. And the analogy I always have for local history here is that it's like being in grandma's attic. You know, there's all of these dark, dusty, cobwebby corners, and you crawl around in there, and you open up boxes, and you just never know what you're going to open up and find. Old photographs, scrapbooks, diaries, postcards, and it's amazing and fun. The problem is that grandma is a hoarder. And there is so much stuff that it's absolutely overwhelming. It can be absolutely overwhelming. So our attempts to make this information accessible, because we've always known that there's a lot of interest in this in the community, to make this accessible has kind of evolved along with technology, really. So it started off, friends groups were indexing newspapers literally on little index cards, and there are just thousands of them. And then it moved to, we put lots of things in Word documents, so that at least, well, now they're on the computer and we can look at them that way. Then we put some of the things from the Word documents into spreadsheets, because, wow, now we can sort them. And then we went from there to becoming really fancy and putting some of those documents onto CD-ROMs so that we could pass them out. And then the web came into play, and we realized, well, let's make databases for these things. But what's really hard is, as you were seeing from the things Deborah was handing out, is that there's so many different types of materials. It's like, how do you organize these things? How do you catalog them all in a consistent way and put them under a single umbrella so that they can all be searched together? So what we had before when we first started out on the web is I was making individual databases and individual front ends for each type of collection. So all these things that you're seeing up here right now, where you've got local history articles, the news index, all of those were separate individual databases, which was all well and good because, well, at least they're on the web and people can find them and search them. But you still had to know to go to every individual one of those to find things. So our goal and our vision was to put all of that together so that you could go one place, you could search one database, and you could bring together all of those different things that you might not have even known had connections to each other before. And so that's kind of where we are now, is that we've got this database, and you can see we've divided it up into 12 collections right now. So they're browsable just by going in here, but it's also searchable. We know there's a big interest in this. The local history site gets approximately 30% of the hits on our entire website are all going to the local history site. We had about 60,000 hits just in the last 3 months on our local history site. So it's very well used and it's popular. What's been interesting to me is we always think of this as being of great interest to the community because it's about us, right? And it's really hyper-local, and as Susan was saying, it's unique to us, right? It's something that we can offer to the community. But what's been really interesting to me is the interest that's come from really around the world. People find they're doing searches for who knows what, and they end up at our local history site. And I'd just like to read one quick email that we got that I thought was really interesting. Dear Sir, Madam, I don't know how to actually start this message, and I have absolutely no idea if I'm writing to the right address, but I hope that you can provide me with some information, though. My name is Tari Essers, and I am from the Netherlands. I live in the vicinity of the Netherlands American Cemetery in Margraten. My family has adopted a grave of a soldier named Frederice T. Flodberg. We visit his grave a couple of times a year, and put flowers on it. Ever since we've adopted the grave, my family and I have been curious about who Frederice was, and we tried multiple times to get more background information about him, but until today, I never succeeded. After my visit to the cemetery today, I decided to do some extra research, and I found a link to your website. I got really excited to finally get to know something more, and this is also the reason why I've decided to email you. I've read the information about Frederice T. Flodberg, but I am secretly hoping you might know something more about him. Maybe you have some photo or even contact details of the soldier's family. Please be so kind to give me some clue about who I could ask or contact in search of more information. With kind regards, Ms. Tari Essers. So if you do a search, yeah, luckily he's got quite an unusual name. So you come up with 2 results, and here he is. And this was put in as part of the Remembering Our Own project. And what we originally had was we had his picture. And then a small biography of him. This came from Robert Nelson, did this research. And then what was interesting was, after we got into contact with the woman, she sent us a photograph of the grave that she's been taking care of. And so she took a picture and she sent us that, and we added it to our site. And so now that's there as well. So I think that's just kind of a personal example of who would have thought, right? Who would have thought that she would have been looking and come to this? And I brought this up this morning at my desk, and I was looking at it, and I noticed that 2 hits came up under Flodberg, which again, who would have thought? And the second one is a list of Watsonville mayors. And he was actually from Watsonville, so I don't know whether this is another family member or what, but I just noticed that for the first time this morning. So that was interesting. So, I'm just going to show you one more search and have to bring up. Here's a search for Hecox. And I'm just going to use this as an example to show you how we've got all sorts of different materials in here. And now you can bring them all up together as opposed to going into searching the different databases. So here we've got photographs, we've got newspaper clippings, things out of magazines. Here you can go here and read the entire article online. Postcards, things out her scrapbook. You can limit them by decade if you want to. If you're only looking for things in the 1860s, you can do that and narrow it down that way. So it gives a lot of flexibility. The other big advantage of having put all of this online into one single database like this and having standardized all the data is that now we've been able to be a part of some bigger data sharing initiatives. So we were approached about a year ago by the Calisphere, the University of California project, and they asked whether we would be willing to share our local history data with them. And so this is a big project with records from over 1 million items from all over the University of California collections and some other collections in the state. And so now we've entered into a relationship with them where they're harvesting our metadata. So every 2 months, we've got a connection with them, and they pull our data up to their site, and so it's always kept up to date within 2 months. So people who are using this as an entry point are then going to be sent back to our database to get the actual item. And from here, then they go on to the Digital Public Library of America. And so now all of our local history items are also cataloged on the Digital Public Library of America. And anytime anybody goes to the Digital Public Library of America and does some sort of search, maybe they'll hit on some Santa Cruz item, they'll be sent back to our website again to get the full text of the item. So it's been a huge, huge project, but it's been really rewarding and actually a lot of fun most of the time.
Okay, are you completing?
I'm done.
Okay. So then sort of the third leg to the stool, and I thought we had someone from the, Dean's is here. Come on up. So we just wanted to also talk about how local history and genealogy are really a community building activity. And we have an amazing genealogical society that houses themselves out of the downtown library. They do immense and magnificent programming all the time at all of our branches. And they really staff our genealogy and local history moving room at this library. And we are able to accomplish so much with the power of this group.
Thank you, Susan. I have a couple of the latest newspaper articles from our society.
You're the president, the co-president,
Yes.
and 100% volunteer.
Thank you. What I really want to emphasize is that we are a nonprofit organization, and whatever we do in collaboration with the library, we've been volunteering many, many hours for quite a period of time, and is that we are volunteering. We're not paid. And when we give a workshop on DNA or a workshop on Ancestry.com and how to understand it and how to use it personally, we're doing that on our own time. Most of us are retired seniors. We're not only more available to help out, we are serving a community of seniors that regularly want to connect on their passion, which is understanding their personal journey with their family, and many times it's within the county of Santa Cruz. And if they want to go back even further, we can help them go to the states that they came from and go to the countries where they came from. We provide speakers from all over that help our members and guests. All our speakers and their topics are for free. We hold them once a month, and the topic could be your Serbian relatives in the Pajaro Valley. The topic may be how to access the sources throughout Santa Cruz County. And we had a couple of people do that just recently, and it's not just here in this library, it's not just the Genealogy Society, it's MA and what they have in their archives. It's the Capitola Historical Museum. It's the San Lorenzo Valley Museum. And what we're seeing now with this huge, huge interest in DNA and Dr. Henry Louis Gates, Finding Your Roots, we're discovering how interconnected we all are and how relevant it is in the context of history. Your personal history, the community history, and beyond. And what we want to do as a society, and we're coming from an old guard. We've been at this since 1971, back in the day before internet, when we were busy indexing, the SURF Local News Index, record books of the alcaldes in early California. These were done by our members free of charge, and you can pass it on down. Now that's part of the old guard. And in fact, there's still a newspaper indexing team that was in collaboration at first with the Friends of the Library, and then went under our auspices, and we've helped fund their computers. And the library has graciously provided them a room once a week to quietly go through all the old newspapers and index them. And as you can see, there's quite a variety here. And I realized that what we're doing is moving towards the scanning digital online age. And we even had to throw out a lot of our books. We had all the, the old U.S. Census federal records. Well, they're now online. We had indexes to the Santa Cruz Sentinel. They're now online. But as I believe you mentioned, Deborah, that not all of the years of the Sentinel are online. And I keep hearing this from the people that are on the newspaper indexing team, and they're very busy going through the Mountain Echo papers, going through the, Valley Press and some of the other newspapers that haven't been indexed yet. And at the same time, we have dedicated members of our society that are scanning like crazy to get some of the records more available to the public. And with your guidance with the library, we really hope to continue this collaboration with providing funding. We volunteered, for instance, 2018, we volunteered 3,791 volunteer hours at this downtown branch. 2017, 4,811 hours at this branch. To date, oh my God, don't have that figure here, to date. I have to say it has gone down some. And the reason it has gone down is that the newspaper indexing team were spending hundreds of hours monthly to index all the local newspapers. And they no longer are needed to do that as much as they were. So now we are moving more towards what can we scan. We need and get it out publicly. So we are needing equipment. We're needing further collaboration, and we are dedicated to follow through with our workshops, our speakers, and the process of getting this information out to all of you and to help you be inspired about your personal family and how it relates to this county. So if there are anything I haven't touched on that you'd like to hear that I haven't mentioned, we have a topic coming up on Polish relatives this next month. We have a DNA workshop. We have an Irish special interest group going on right now. And the list goes on. We have a DNA workshop that one of our members is going to, not DNA, Ancestry.com workshop that's going to be held at the Scotts Valley Library in June. And we will continue to assist the library branches whenever we're asked, because we do provide that for free. All you need to do is contact our society. Thank you. Thank you very much.
I just want to say, so a couple things. Local history and genealogy are a major component of our programming. The idea of keeping a local history archive is a major component of our collections development plan. You can see a shift from print to digital, but there's this huge point in life right now where we've got to digitize. It will take time and money. It will save significantly space. We have to work together as a community and with broader consortia to get this work done. And this is a really big issue when we get to the downtown library, because there is a major chunk of space being used for this archive, which serves the whole community at the downtown library. One of the things that we are going to change is we had a complete floating collection, and except for some exceptions, we are going to develop some local history collections at each of the branches that will be held exclusive to that branch. So you can check them out, but the item will go back to that branch. So that will be a change in our policy, where we were holding almost all of our local history downtown. But what probably means we have to spend a little bit more on local history collections to sort of duplicate it downtown and at a local branch. But they're popular, people love them. And honestly, we can't do enough programs when we do. And so part of what we're trying to do is moving a little bit from the one-on-one to do more teaching type programs, because you can get 50, 60 people on just about any topic. And the great news is we have a lot of amazing resources in the community that are willing to work with us and provide programming for free or at low cost.
Great. Thank you. Questions by board members?
Okay.
Thank you for the presentation. Any comments from members of the public?
Thank you, Beans.
All right. Well, thank you. That was great. So, takes us to additional materials.
You do have a February 19th forecast from Marcus.
Okay, and that's this document?
Correct.
All right. Any additions or deletions to the agenda?
No.
All right. So now that takes us to oral communications. We have the items that are not on today's agenda. We will be talking about the hours, I think, in the budget. Seeing none, I will close public comment, and that takes us to our director's report.
I submitted in writing. Nothing to add. There's a lot of fun activities coming up in the library. This Saturday we have May the 4th Be With You. I think you might enjoy it. I hear you have a Stormtroopers outfit. You should show.
All right. Takes us to a report by the Friends. Do we have a report?
Morning, everybody. I can't remember, did I give you the good news last time that we've won the $300,000 grant from One Ray Peninsula Foundation? So it's a challenge grant for 3 of the branches, Garfield Park, La Selva Beach, and Boulder Creek. So we are working madly now to try to match those $300,000. Meanwhile, May is going to be very busy for us too. The Friends are starting off May by providing $15,000 to the library for summer reading. We're bringing about 19 programs into the system, and we're also completely funding one of their new projects, which is an incentive to provide free new books to every person under the age of 18 who's read 5 books during the summer. Also, to talk about May the 4th, we are going to show up tomorrow at Looker with R2. One of our board members is going to walk around with R2 and pass out flyers about the May the 4th event. And she's very much a board member who's been involved with our STEAM programming, so she's working with the libraries on that. We also have great news for anybody who's here on Mondays. You should go eat at Hula's, either for lunch or dinner, because every Monday they're going to give us a percentage of their proceeds to the Friends, just for the month of May. So they have great drinks, they have great food. Show up there. And it will end May with our Civic World book sale at Civic here. So it's on Memorial Day weekend, and I forget, it's the 24th and the 25th, I think. So, and that's what I got.
All right. Thank you. That takes us to a report from our LAC, Library Advisory Commission.
Yes, hi, Cindy Jackson. We met in April. We'll be meeting in May in a couple of weeks. Susan included most of the details about what we've been working on. I would probably say that we're doing the review of the library policies, and we've also been asked to look at the library service model. And I would expect we'll be looking at the budget and perhaps making a recommendation to you about that. Questions?
Question? Thank you. Great. Thank you. Okay, comments by board members. Comments? Okay, that takes us to our consent calendar. So the consent calendar can be taken with one motion. Does anyone want to pull any of the items that are listed off consent? Anyone from the public want to pull any item from the consent calendar? All right, seeing none, look for a motion to approve consent.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Second?
All right, we have a motion and a second for the discussion. Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, that takes us to our budget presentation.
Deep breath.
All right.
The budget is evolving. We gave you a draft budget document. I would like to update 3 pieces of paper within the budget, and I'd like to talk through, so can you hand those? Yes. Oh, I'd like to talk through, I can sit here and do this. The budget itself. Can you get me in presentation mode?
That's actually the TV.
Yeah, I was thinking. We could watch
We can watch.
boxing for Is it okay if I talk from here?
Sure. Sure.
But first, I want to talk about our accomplishments. It's actually been a really tough year. We've had a lot on our plates. We've begun construction in Felton and Capitola. We've created designs for La Selva Beach and Boulder Creek. And by the end of the year, we'll have designs for Rancho Forty, Live Oak, and Garfield Park. We did receive council endorsement of the downtown branch. That's a little bit in a state of flux, but it took a lot of work to get there. And we've developed scope documents and partnership agreements with County Parks and Rec for the Live Oak Annex. We've developed criteria documents for Aptos. We've eliminated kids' fines. We've developed a whole new summer reading program based on some best practices in the field. We've done a major push to partner with the schools. We've increased the amount of STEAM programming exponentially. And we focused on some of our underserved populations, particularly Spanish speakers in our community. We've replaced all our voice over IP hardware in anticipation of moves. We've completed digital skills refresh program for the staff. We have 75 staff members that completed basically a basic skills course, so we can help our patrons with their tech questions. We've completed our Live Answers software deployment. This is a reference tool, and we're working on our reference service model, our customer service commitment, our collections development plan, with the hope of finalizing our service plan this summer and fall before we open the new buildings. We completed round 2 of the innovation grant program. Some exciting things happening there. And we're working really closely with the Friends on their infrastructure, strategic planning, work planning, and their budgets. 2020 will be the hardest year of my professional life. I just need to say that. This will be the hardest year for the staff as well. We have to open Felton and Capitola. We have to close La Selva Beach, Boulder Creek, Garfield, and Branciforte in the next 12 months. It takes my breath away, and to be honest, it keeps me up at night because I'm not exactly sure how we're going to accomplish this. This affects every person in our organization. The technology staff are working diligently right now planning the technology. The collections staff are ordering new collections. We've got to time everything. It's like a dinner party where you want all your courses at the right moment. So we're going to complete Scotts Valley and the Live Oak remodels. We still have a lot of work to do on the Annex, Aptos, and downtown. We're talking about moving administrative headquarters. We've got to implement a totally new service model. And I know we've been working on it all year, but the truth of the matter is the staff has to implement the service model, and we've really tried to take a grassroots approach to the pieces of it so that we get staff support. We're doing something called a community-led programming model. Both Aptos Friends and the Felton Friends have agreed to work with us, but part of what we're trying to do is allow the community to lead in our buildings. If you look at the Friends, the Aptos Friends One Book program, Community Reads program, I think it's a great model of empowering the community to lead on programming. But there's a lot of issues that come up, a lot of toes that get stepped on, a lot of policies that we need to modify in order to make this work. And I'm really glad that Felton's sort of been willing to take this on, because I think sort of the first person to really do this is going to have to do a lot of that implementation work, but I think it's really important to the long-term sustainability of the libraries. And then we've got to approve the JPA leases, scope policies, and there's a whole series of policies like the building, meeting room use policies. So for example, San Jose allows the buildings to be used after hours without staff. You can check out the building. And we want to look at innovations like that because of, and I think Felton's a great place to start with this, because of some of the things that the community wants to do with the building and our limitations on staffing. But this is going to take a whole new way of looking at our facilities, and then how do we ensure that that people are safe, that our collections are safe, and that the building's safe. But there are ways to do it. So today I just want to talk about our forecast, and you're going to see deficit spending, and we have to have a conversation about that. I want to talk about the pilot program we initiated 2 years ago on hours. I want to talk about our revenue projections and MOE funds. I want to talk about our expenditure requests. I want to talk about our budget problem. And I want to talk about hours. So, I'm going to ask you to deficit spend. I'm going to ask you to use fund balances to put staff positions on for a short period of time. And the reason I'm going to do that is several, the reasons. First and foremost, I am assuming that the library will have access to the $1.6 million in maintenance of effort funds in FY22. We have 2 years till FY22, and we have some of our biggest workloads in the next 2 years. I want to say that I think our personnel costs are overstated in these budgets, and I think our sales tax is potentially understated. So I want to take them as next month and sort of hone that. We have a 20% budget reserve. We went up from 15%. We have a large fund balance on top of the budgeted reserve, and we have real need. So I think you all know this, but to start something is a lot more work than to just operate it. And in the next 12 months, we have a lot of new things that we're going to be starting. And it's going to take time and staff, and I'm really nervous about the volume of work in light of our staffing. We'll talk about the staffing. I know everyone's so sick of, I come from Minnesota, but I come from Minnesota. We were considered one of the most lightly staffed libraries. We served the same size population. We had about 10% more staff. We had only 7 libraries, and we did these projects one at a time. We didn't start one until one was done. And the truth of the matter is, right now we have 10 projects going. There's 2 under construction, but the planning and activities that go behind it are all happening at once. And to be honest, if I sound stressed, it's because I am. My voice gets up higher. But I also want to say that I think the staff is really stressed too. I don't want to break them. So, our budget overview, this is the correct deficit at the current moment. We are projecting that if I get the requests that I've asked for, we will overspend by $1.1 million. I'm going to actually up it in this presentation slightly more. So I'm talking about a $1.1 million problem. Marcus's latest forecast, if we spend $1.1 million more in expenditures than revenue, you see we go into a period of deficit spending. 22 goes into the blue because this assumes that we get the 1.6 million in MOE. So I'm going to start with the 2-year hours pilot program. 2 years ago, we looked at our hours and they were abysmal. I mean, beyond abysmal. And we made a plea to the board that we wanted to add just under 5 FTE. We assumed it would cost $410,000 in deficit spending, that we would add 72 hours a week across the entire system. And I guess the thing I want to say is over the last 2 years, we're seeing growth in visits and circulation. And in each of the last 2 years, we've seen positive fund balances. So where we thought the $410,000 would use $410,000 of our unbudgeted balances, it didn't. We came out in the black. I would like to declare this pilot over because I'm going to ask you for more staff, honestly. But I think, there's a lot of reasons why we are in the black, but I think we've had very conservative budgeting, and the result has been that a big place for it is I think we have significant savings from vacancies that produce excess revenue and paid for the $410,000. But I do believe our base budget can afford these original 5. So what do I need for FY20? Staff. We need to begin maintaining our buildings, and we need to have a conversation about CalPERS. I'm asking for 5 FTE. We're adding 15,000 square feet to our program with Felton and Capitola. Both are smaller libraries that are becoming much larger libraries. I would like 2.5 FTE each for each of them. And without a doubt, I need the staff 2 to 4 months before the building opens because I need them to set up the buildings. But in this budget, I've annualized that because honestly, I would love to go and get the staff as soon as we can get them on board. I know we can talk to the friends from Capitola and from Felton, but there's so many activities that they've already started program and planning committees, and I don't even have the staff that are going to be in the building that in many ways are going to be doing those programs. And so in light of the unknowns that are going to happen, I would love to honestly have a tiny bit of excess fat. Maybe I shouldn't have used that example of me, but we are such a lean machine. I can do this on paper and say, yes, we can annualize these and say we only need them for a half a year. But the truth of the matter is I need bodies, and if I can't hire them fast enough, I need temps to just help us move in the buildings and set the buildings up. And we need to plan programs 4 to 6 months before so that we can advertise them appropriately. There's so much that needs to get done. So I want to show the FTE history. Full-time equivalent is a staff person, 1 FTE. So you can see in 2009 was our peak. We had 120 FTE. As of 2019, we have 92. We have 10 branches. We are very, very lightly staffed compared to our past. Facility maintenance is something we've talked about. As we look at developing the leases for the library, said the JPA will do all the maintenance on all the facilities. And we do not have the budget for that. We believe we need $400,000 more a year to do basic maintenance on these facilities. Our plan is to add $50,000 a year to our budget over time, over 8 years, until we get to that increase of $400,000 more. So in this year's budget, I'm asking for an increase of $50,000. The PERS unfunded liability. One of our sort of understandings has been that it would be really difficult for the city to do a prepayment on PERS unfunded liability and to take the library and not do it. So last year, after the budget had been approved, we agreed to make a payment out of our balances because the city was doing so. This year, I put it in the budget. I don't know if the city is in any position to actually make this payment this year. It's about $336,000, but I felt like it needed to go here so that you understood the cost of it. And I think we need just a little bit more time with the city's budget to find out if they are seriously considering making their own payment. But I think it would be very difficult to uncouple the library from the city on this at this time. I did not ask for collections money. I could. We are maintaining our 8%, and we've built it into the base budget. We did have some one-time funds in 2017 and 2018. You gave us, remember, a one-time grant to enhance collections. But the 2020 estimate is 8% of general revenue. Ultimately, I do think next year we'll be asking for some collections enhancements, but I felt obligated to at least show you where we are. So, the 1.122 was the initial reduction. The truth of the matter is there's a couple things that missed the budget process that are about $44,000. So I think our real problem is about $1.16 million. So, how do we solve that? What I'd like to do between now and June, I wish I could have solved it by today, but I think more discussions need to happen. I think we can reduce this deficit by $600,000. I think if we took off, for example, the prepay, I think it's leaning that the city will likely not do a prepay. That would solve a portion of it. I'd like to work with Nicole on the sales tax revenue because we were looking at January's projections, and I think they might be light. I think the personnel costs are annualized and high, and our vacancy factor, so it's when it takes a while when someone quits to replace them and you actually save money. I think we could up potentially the vacancy factor. One of the things we haven't talked about is I'm assuming that some of the MOE money comes into the library, but there's a country commitment probably by the city of Santa Cruz in 2022 and beyond. And that might help ease some of our issues. Again, I could unannualize the staff costs and, just fund Felton and Capitola for a half a year. And I gave you the timing. This is where this starts to get really complicated, but I gave you the timing of the projects, okay? The truth of the matter is the projects aren't going to be done or ready on my timeline. And so, ideally, we had hoped that Capitola would open and Aptos would close on the same day, so we can reuse staff for other things. I think that's unlikely, and so potentially when Aptos closed, there's a substantial group of staff there that we can use to backfill, but I'm growing more and more worried about timing on some of these issues. The Aptos staff can't necessarily backfill Felton's opening because no matter I feel like if we can reduce our 1920 to about a $600,000 in deficit spending, you'll see red in 20 and 21, but all the other red will go away. So that's what my commitment to you is by June, is to come in with a $600,000 less deficit, but my plan is to deficit spend. You can say no. I just wanted to look at, this is the same assumptions carried out, looking at the green is our budgeted reserve at 20%. The black is a capital fund we keep for replacement of cars. And the blue is our balances that are unrestricted. And this is carrying that $1.1 million deficit out. But I think if we add $600,000 a year back in, we're not even going to touch the budgeted reserve. Okay, we're going to talk hours, and I'm going to give you a lecture. This is my ideal of a modern library. Not anybody else's, but I think there's a lot of people in the community that would say this. You'd build a 20 to 30,000 square foot branch. We have only one branch that's bigger than that. You'd have retail hours, 69 a week. You do 10 a.m. to 9 at night, Monday through Friday. You do 10 to 5 Saturday and Sunday. You would have children's, teen, adult spaces and collections. You'd have computers, Wi-Fi, and a maker space. You'd have program rooms and study spaces, plural. You'd have reference available all the hours that you are open. You would have a kid, someone who specializes in kids. You would have someone who specializes in teens. And you would have someone who specializes in adults. And usually the adult person and the reference people kind of combine. You'd have circulation staff. You'd also pay people to help people with technology. And you'd have a wide variety of community volunteers. We can't afford this. And this is not the physical model that we have. So, modern library services, which we want to be able to provide at every single one of our 10 libraries, okay? We want to be able to do circulation of print and digital materials. We want to have reference support. We want to have computing and computing support. We want to have learning spaces, so like study rooms and program rooms. We want to do outreach to schools in the community. We want to partner with key community groups. And we want to do learning programs, early literacy, student success, digital literacy, adult life skills, which are things like how to buy a home, financing, name some more, our homelessness programs, basic adult literacy, and creative aging, which is more the, as we age, we want to learn things. So I would probably put the history and the genealogy and arts programs. We want to do this at all the libraries. And so what we did, when I started, we were entirely centralized because of the budget cuts. And what we heard in the strategic planning process is everybody wants all these services. But in a very small library, I can't physically staff them with this. Sorry, I can't go backwards. Oh well. I can't staff them with all, they're not going to have a teen librarian, they're not going to have a kids librarian. What we decided to do is go from an entirely centralized model to a regional model. And this is what we've been building our service model upon. The idea being is not everybody's located at a branch, but all these services happen in the branch, and the full spectrum of people are located within a region. Okay? So you have teen services in a region, you have kid services in a region. Some of those people, though, the teen librarian, might not be located at every library, but it might go to every library in that region. And they're going to go to those high schools in the region. And this is the way in which we try to afford putting all these services in all of these branches. Now what did I do? Escape. So, to determine hours and staffing, we really wanted to look at demand for service. I mean, usage is a really important aspect. Demands for types of services. So, at Branson 40, there's a lot of seniors who are interested in computing. And at Capitola, there's a lot of families with very small children. And they're not all the same. Okay, so we recognize that different branches are going to have different kinds of programs based upon the demographics of who they serve. The location, size, and layout of buildings and grounds. Honestly, Felton with the park, even though the park is not the library's responsibility, the truth of the matter is something goes bad in the park, the person's going to go and walk to the library and say there's something bad going on here. That downtown library, by its location, has more incidents, and so does Branson 40. Things about the physical aspects of the library can cause work. Okay? The other thing I want to say is staff skills and availability. And I know people say, well, you shouldn't worry about that. They'll be happy to have a job. But the truth of the matter is, it's harder to get people to work in Boulder Creek and La Selva Beach than it is in any other branch because of drive times. And not everyone's good at everything. I know org chart says you're a librarian, you can do it all. You can do tech, teen, youth, but not everybody can do that. And you got to recognize the strengths. There's nothing worse than taking a librarian who hates early literacy and making them do a story time. It is the most excruciating and painful thing you've ever seen. And then I also want to say union work rules. And we are working with the union. We have spent a lot of time saying, we're looking at our vacation procedures. We're looking at how we do lunches and breaks. We're looking at we have a policy right now of nobody can be alone in the building. All of those things have a cost, a staffing cost, and we're looking at that, but we also have to honor the MOUs that we have. So, we've been developing this service model. I wish it was done. It's taking more time, but the staff need it. We're moving from centralized to regional. We were creating sort of tiers of libraries where we wanted to make sure that every region had a regional library in it with a lot of hours and a lot of services. We wanted to make sure that all the small libraries had a minimum of 36 hours a week. And we think there's something in the middle. And we actually don't know how this is going to play out once these buildings are done. For example, Aptos is the busiest library in that region, but it's going to be physically smaller than the Capitola Library when it's done. So we actually don't really know who's going to be the busy library in the South region. So one of the things we were thinking was Gateway would be about 36, the community libraries would be in the 40 to 50 hour range, regional libraries would be 50 plus. We assumed that there would be stepped core services. We agree that collections, reference, and kids have to be available in every library, that we would target programming to the demographic group that the library is attracting, that we are going to look at unstaffing things so that we can spread the hours of use. And we want to make sure, though, that we have the full spectrum of hours of programs and services within a region. So, I mean, the thing that we heard most was, I'm sick of having to go downtown to do that. We want to have genealogy programs as well someplace else. That was the plan. So, part of the problem is we're going to be shifting a lot during the next fiscal year. We had agreed that we were going to agree to hours on July 1st as part of the budget process. We have a lot of changes happening. So right now, Capitola Library is closed. We believe on November 1st, we need to close Felton, the church library, to begin to transfer everything that's in Felton to the new branch. And we believe we need to close La Selva Beach so it can begin to get reconstructed. And we're trying to maintain service regionally when we close things by pumping up hours at branches nearby. So when Capitola closed, we greatly improved hours at Aptos and at Live Oak. The third thing that's going to happen, we believe around February 1st, Felton's going to open. And Felton honestly is so lightly staffed, we're not going to send their staff out. We're going to be adding to it, and their staff will be doing the setup in the new branch. But we believe we're going to close Boulder Creek, branch of 40, Garfield Park, and La Selva Beach will stay closed. Okay? Complicated. We can, our hope is to reallocate staff within regions, so the branch of 40 staff and the Garfield staff would go to downtown. And we aren't necessarily looking at expanded hours downtown. We just think it will drive business. But again, these things are an art form. The last one we're hoping for is that Capitola opens on April 1st. That's our hope. That one's a little iffy. I think the other issue is we're hoping to close Aptos on April 1st, and I think that one's a little iffy too. But this is one where the Aptos staff would really help us in other branches. So, in my head, I know Felton's going to respond to the 44. I believe we can get, if we get the 5 FTE, I believe that we can get Felton to over 50 hours a week. But my hope was to do it from some Aptos or Capitola mixing. And I got nervous because I don't know where Capitola and Aptos are ending up. And if I had a recommendation, I would probably go with Felton over 50 hours temporarily. And again, I think how this all starts out at the end is another set of activities. Art form. Okay. So I thought we had an agreement that we were going to negotiate hours annually as part of the budget process. I thought we had an agreement that 36 minimum hours a week for small libraries. And I actually thought we had an agreement that we all agreed there was going to be chaos for about 8 years until we all figured this out. And it may take a little longer because, the new branches are going to get different clientele. We're going to get more people all together. You really don't know exactly how it's all going to sort out until we've been open. Everything's been open for about 2 years. Then I just found out about these. So there's RDA leases, Regional Development Authority leases that were signed years ago. In the Scotts Valley one, which was signed between the county, the city of Scotts Valley, and the library director at the time, says that the Scotts Valley Branch Library will be open no fewer hours than the greatest number of hours at Aptos or Live Oak. We are not currently following that. And the other one is, this one is when the new Capitola branch opens. This was signed in 2004. That Capitola will have the staffing level and the service hours of Aptos. Okay, so I hate this. This is bad public policy. I don't know. I mean, with a JPA that requires unanimous votes to ascertain, and whose job it is to determine staffing and hours. I don't know how it relates. I think it creates crazy incentives for the library director. What I want to do is, it's interesting because Capitola could easily exceed Aptos. So I'm still trying to figure out if they do I have to do them at a lesser staffing and hours because Aptos is lesser? Does this mean I make Felton the regional branch? Because if I make Aptos a regional branch, 4 other libraries get the exact same level of hours and services. So honestly, I spent the whole weekend saying, I don't know what to do about this. I don't know how to, this is inconsistent with my service model. I gotta kind of go back to page 1.
So before you get up, I think I can provide a little bit of clarity and background on that. So I think how this reads is that 3 libraries are tied, Aptos, Capitola, Scotts Valley. I don't think Live Oak is tied.
There's a Live Oak statement.
There's a Live Oak statement, but it's the greater of the 2. So assuming Aptos has more hours than Live Oak, the Live Oak hours are relevant pursuant to the agreements. And from Capitola's standpoint, I just want to reiterate that this agreement was very important. This was a component of a long-term negotiation between the county and this city of Capitola. Before my time, when I certainly learned about it when I came, that the city was going to commit to building it, and the county, as the custodians of the library fund, was going to commit to staffing it, and we wanted to have assurances that we were going to build something that was going to be staffed. So this has certainly been something that's been on the forefront of our minds in Capitola for a long time, and an important element.
So the real difficult thing is, right now, to do this, I need 9 FTE on July 1st.
I hear you. We'll have to talk more about that during the deliberations.
So, again, I just want to say hours are very controversial. The community is deeply interested. But this is really, really fundamental to where we go and what incentives we create. And these decisions will have huge impacts on our budget. And with that, I will sit.
Okay. Are there any questions from board members on the budget? Do you want to do questions, or should we go public comment first and then we can? Okay. Can we get some public comment on the proposed budget for fiscal year 1920?
This is where you can go, Nancy.
Oh, that was a lot to think about there. I'm back. I'm slightly sleep deprived because of I can blame it on my 7-month-old granddaughter. So I feel, as do other people in the community, that opening up our brand new library with 44 hours, closed on Friday, open some days on 10, some days on 11, is a very erratic schedule for what we've been working for since, really, it's been 20 years. I have a statement. I guess I'll read it. It's from our officers of our steering committee, Felton Library Friends Steering Committee. We didn't have too much time to process this, but and we certainly didn't have time to process the RDA leases. So I'm just going to read this because we wrote it, and it'll give you some feeling about our, the way we're looking at the open hours. And officers are Judy Sherman and Michelle Mosher and myself. As the 9,000 square foot building rises, so do the expectations of San Lorenzo Valley residents in terms of accessibility. We respectfully ask this board to reconsider the proposed open hours for the new Felton branch scheduled to open in January 2020. The Felton branch is expanding more than any other branch, from 1,250 square feet to 9,000 square feet. To increase hours by only 8 hours for a brand new and much larger facility is, we believe, short-sighted in terms of building a successful program. This branch is unique within the system and the state in that it will open with an adjoining park. The emphasis on environmental literacy within the library and park is an exciting proposition and is worthy of a strong beginning. With a history of many years of inconsistent open hours and constantly shifting staff, there will be challenges in ensuring that community members finally feel secure in the accessibility of their new branch. As a now informally defined mid-sized branch, a minimum of 50 hours will provide a winning start for this much anticipated library. I'd like to address 3 problematic issues with the proposal. Opening at 10 o'clock a.m. on weekdays makes it easy for users to remember opening times. It's been observed also by myself that varying the opening times during the week, as outlined in the proposed hours, makes it difficult for users to remember the opening times. Note in the overall proposal that most branches consistently open at 10. In addition, opening at 11 is not ideal for toddler and preschool crowd or the senior population. The second point is staying open until 7 o'clock p.m., a minimum of 3 nights a week, midweek, is ideal for working parents, commuters, and students. And I'll remind you that we have a fairly healthy sized student population in San Lorenzo Valley. We're 1 mile from a K through 12 campus, and our population is almost identical to Scotts Valley in terms of students. Lastly, there's the proposed Friday closure. Friday is a high usage day. It's the end of a work week and the last day of the school week. It's an important day for providing continuity of library usage and programming through Saturday. A preferred date for closing would be Sunday. Now that the construction of the building is well in hand, it's important that this board deliver hours that will ensure the greatest degree of success. The amount of work it's taken by county and library staff and by an active community to shepherd this project through has been impressive. We urge you to reconsider the proposed hours for this brand new library and find a way to open it with hours that will provide a strong foundation for the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment? All right, seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board.
I think from our perspective at the county, we're very concerned with the deficits you're showing in the budget. I think we would like to try to work with you to bring those down, and it sounds like that's your intention to try to do that. I would have a question for Marcus. I know the fund balance report wasn't in the budget, so I'm wondering where those numbers are at. That's one of my questions. And then in regards to the PERS prepayment, we see that as a way to, I don't think we can support that given these deficit numbers that you're showing. So I would want to know where the city is at in terms of thinking through if they're actually going to do the PERS prepayment and what that means for the library. But I think right now we're opposed to the prepayment. And the hours, I know that this information has just come to light, and the RDA leases were before my time, so they kind of fell off my radar, but now that they're back in the forefront, working with you to try to figure out how to address this and see how it works with your service model. I don't know if I have any solutions today, but I think we have to have a conversation around it. Those are my initial comments and questions. Oh, and I want to add, in regards to the MOE, I know that the county and the city of Santa Cruz wants to start talking about that and addressing what's going to happen after the agreement ends in 2 years. I think I have the intention to start working on that as soon as we lock down our county budget.
Thank you.
And I have done some initial kind of ballparky look at that, but I think in previous conversations we had talked with maybe modeling it on how the library fund works in terms of looking at what the city of Santa Cruz would contribute, similar to, you know, the library fund has a property tax set aside, so what is the similar amount for Santa Cruz? And I think we want to pursue that approach to see what that number is. But just ballparking, looking at previous analysis that Mary Jo Walker had done, our former auditor, controller, treasurer, tax collector, I think it does mean more for the city of Santa Cruz to put into the library system. So I want to put that out there. If Susan is going to access the additional money that's sitting in the library fund, I think Santa Cruz is going to have to contribute more. So we're going to need to have those conversations and figure out what those amounts are.
Yes. Thank you, though. I think that would be progress.
That was my expectation.
Yeah.
Thank you, Nicole, for opening that up. Similar concerns on the unfunded liability, but first of all, thank you so much for your presentation. That was fantastic, by the way, and love seeing you up there and walk us through everything. You spent a lot of time and staff, and I appreciate that very much. It was very helpful. Would like to see the fund balance, like the concept of trying to bring that down, have a lot of trepidation about the deficit spending, of course. The hours issue, I really see it as a policy issue that depending on what the solution is, that's going to need to come back to our respective bodies for discussion. And then the MOE gives me pause. I don't want a solution predicated on an assumption that we're going to have access to that money, because it does involve stakeholders that need to weigh in. And so it sounds like there's a path of travel in terms of how we start having those conversations. And so that, for me, is not the solution to be able to see those numbers in a better place on the forecast. So I agree that the conversations need to happen, and then there needs to be a set kind of solution with respect to that before we make an assumption that we're going to be able to rely on that. So, but overall, those are just my general comments. I'd love to hear what the rest of the board has to say.
Here we go. Yeah, thanks, Susan, for your presentation. It was really good. And you're right, there's so many variables that are at play here. You know, a lot of really great things and a lot of really great challenges. Obviously, new facilities, expanded space is really incredible, and more coming down the line in an environment where things are changing. You know, that's just a really challenge to do. And in the fiscal environment that we're all challenged with, where obviously our costs of doing business is exceeding our revenues. And here it's not just because of the built-in cost, but also the fact that we do have to staff up more if we have more facilities. So that's something we're going to have to sort of balance. And then looking at the system from a system-wide approach too, because the branches are different now too. So it's actually we almost kind of have to look at a different model, because there are different facilities and it's going to look different. So the timing is right to do that. So I'm completely open to whatever sort of makes sense and to balancing these interests. And I agree that we do need to look very carefully at trying to minimize the deficits. I know we do have a fund balance that's above and beyond our reserves, but nonetheless, given some of the challenges out there, we have to be really careful with that. So I'm not opposed to necessarily doing deficit spending, but we have to just make sure that we cover some of these other issues and questions that have been brought up. We'll have to do some thinking and some discussions in that regard over the next few months, and certainly in the next year.
Before I guess I go to comments, I do have one question. I probably should have asked it earlier, but on the revised page 21, I see the estimated budgetary savings for $770,000. Can someone help me understand what that?
That's our vacancy factor that we have been building in, but it still remains.
Okay. Well, so then I'll say that.
And we negotiate that sort of with the city based upon how much
Yes.
savings we have. I honestly, I think it could go higher, but I'm still worried about the contracts that aren't settled yet, and that the initial SEIU contract was higher than we anticipated. So I'm afraid, I still want to have a conservative estimate on some level there.
Sure.
I just
That was my understanding of what that figure was.
It's another factor. Yeah.
So I'll start at the kind of I guess historically I'll start at the top. So when we approved the pilot program for hours, I think one of the things we said was we were gonna need to see metrics at the end of the day to see how it worked. And that's something that I think would be really valuable for me, is to understand we put in more time, operating hours at, certain branches, and then, beforehand, we had X number of checkouts and visitors per day, and after we had Y, and how did it look? So I think that would be really helpful for me, before we sort of stamp success on that and move forward with it. I think I'm having a really hard time getting from kind of year to year and understanding the adopted budget, where we were, our estimated actual and the department request for next year, like the relationship particularly around staffing, what those actual costs are, and like, are we projected to be deficit spending this year or not? Because it's hard for me to understand. Related to that is this estimated budgetary savings. Like I get using that, I've used it myself, this kind of thing on my city budget, but by the time I get to this stage where I'm estimating the expenditures for this year, that number is zero, because I now have a good estimate of what my actual staffing is going to be, because we're at this point, almost 10 months into the fiscal year. So I would expect that would be going to zero now, because we know what our actual staffing costs are for this year. We have a really good handle on it.
So the city of Santa Cruz just has a real conservative approach to estimating salaries, and they do 1 FTE whole.
I get that kind of at a front-end budget assumption, but at this point, at least from my budgeting experience, what I would do is I would run budget reports for each different department and say, okay, so we're now 10 months into the fiscal year, what % expended are we, what's coming? Do we have, 3 people coming online, or are we gonna just trail out this fiscal year as we've been going? So you're able to hone in that estimate, and you don't need to have that figure anymore. You can actually have your personnel figure reflect what you actually think it's gonna be, given 10 months of data.
I just want to also respond to, I think we have some work to do about year end. One of the things that happened was the PERS prepayment that we approved late after the budget last year got charged to this year. And so structurally, our budget and our spending on personnel is less than our budget, but we had this almost $700,000 payment that got added to this fiscal year for that PERS prepayment, which is sort of the difference between what the accounting system is showing and what Marcus has been showing. But I think we'll do some more work on that to detail it and show it to you.
Yeah, thank you for that, because that was going to be actually one of my next points. Was I finally, it was hard because I was having trouble getting pages to jive, and I kind of got to that where I was seeing 0 in the PERS prepayment budget line, and then this huge expenditure, and that was throwing the whole personnel. So understanding that, maybe looking at it a little bit differently, because I think what it shows in personnel, it's hiding what's actually going on with our FTE and the number of FTE we currently have today, and then where we'd be going in the future. I think so. That's kind of the foundational aspects. Is I just like really get my head around where we are today with our staffing costs, how we've been doing it, hitting our budget, and then with the request, what's a realistic extra, and then I think to chime in to what something Nicole said was, where are we with the fund balance? We authorized a chunk of money to go out for a pilot program for extra hours and extra FTE associated with it. That was a hard lift for this board. It took multiple meetings and to understand that we were going to commit to deficit spending. And if it turned out we didn't actually deficit spend with that, and the metrics show that it worked, and now you're here saying I want to do sort of the same thing again, I think that that's a reasonable request. But again, we have that same kind of conversation, like how do we unring the bell? We're in a great economic up cycle right now. If we're getting into a deficit spending pattern in a good economic cycle, what does that mean in a bad economic cycle? So that was a lot.
I do want to say that I think the one difference between this ask and that ask is the $1.6 million that is available in 2 years. And 2 years ago, when you made that decision, there was no potential funding source.
Well, I mean, I guess I would stress that that's contingent upon the renewal of our library financing authority agreement, which is going to expire in 2 years. And so I'm confident we will find a solution, but I don't want to bet the system that we find a solution, so.
And I'll be very frank, though, without that assumption, we are probably going to go into cuts in hours and staff. I mean, if we don't get that money, we shouldn't do the 5 additional FTE, and we need to reduce hours and staff right now.
Right. And so
That's the ugly alternative.
Yeah.
Right. And we're adding
We're adding.
facilities and square footage.
Well, and the other thing you need to consider is maybe depending on how negotiations go, maybe it's less than that full amount, right? So what does that look like in terms of how that funds the new positions?
And then in terms of hours, I guess when I look at this, I see a lot of moving pieces. I totally get that, but I also see a fair number of branches that are going to be closing as we sort of move forward, and Felton and Capitola come online.
Unfortunately, they tend to be really small branches.
With very little.
The one that will close and make a difference is Aptos. We could really use that staff.
Okay.
And the truth of the matter, like Live Oak has gone way up in staffing, and I'm going to put the Capitola staff back at Capitola, but then I need to put the Aptos staff back at Live Oak, or the Aptos staff at Live Oak, because we'll increase hours there, because Aptos closing is going to be really hard on our system. It's the second busiest library in the whole system.
Okay.
And we probably might have to go higher on Capitola.
Yeah. Well, maybe what would be helpful would be sort of an FTE count by branch and showing, and I get it that people can't, it's easy to show it that way, but I also want to respect the fact that employees live somewhere, and just to say, oh, you can go from Aptos one day and work up in Boulder Creek the next may or may not be feasible, so there's that feasibility component. And then I would just reiterate something, I can't remember which board member said, but the hours, this is the first time I'd seen it. I was trying to reach out to, my elected, I was trying to reach out to some community members. I'm glad that I think there's a logic to the Capitola branch hours as proposed, but I think there also could be a logic to maybe paring back some of the later evenings and then trying to open 7 days a week. But I wanted to get feedback from my greater community, maybe from branch manager, and talk more about it down the road.
And the truth of the matter is, I was hoping to be farther along in this budget process. We only have 2 months to make our decisions. I'm open to having a special meeting at the end of June if we really can't get through some of this stuff.
Okay, well, I think that may be helpful to keep on. Would it be better, well, we could do a subcommittee to work on this. Alternatively, we could consider scheduling a special meeting at this time and then canceling it if we didn't need it.
I think we need between now and June to work out an actual proposed budget, but yes, I think we need to schedule something at the end of June to adopt it.
We'll make that schedule, and then we can always cancel if we feel confident enough.
Okay. Martine, you mentioned a subcommittee, is that something?
That's another alternative if you want to have a group of us. I guess that's just 2 of us.
We can, but there are 3 jurisdictions who are affected by the hours, so I don't know how you're going to get, the county obviously would want to be on it, and so, and it's like Scotts Valley or Capitola.
As long as the agreements are respected, I don't have to be on the hours. I'm thinking more the staffing, the FTEs seems to me.
Do you want to work individually with the jurisdictions?
I would prefer to do it that way.
Okay.
I know there's a political aspect to this, but there's also a operational.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Are there other comments by the board? Okay. Seeing none, then I don't believe we needed action at this time.
Nope. Marcus.
Oh, Marcus,
So I was taking notes of questions, and I thought I'd knock out a few of them. if it's
that'd be great.
helpful.
Awesome.
And I think you have the schedule.
Oh, this February?
No.
We don't have that. We don't have that.
Oh, that, but I know you.
That was a slide.
Yeah. So the fund balance status is shown in this chart. The last fund balance report we prepared was in January. And I'll start with not an excuse, but we're realizing that our administrative services are probably not flexible enough or sufficient enough to support the direction the library board is going, as the demand for work is increasing. The library renegotiated the cost contract and reduced the rate $150,000 a couple years ago, so we don't have the same resource commitment available, and we're not as flexible to cities we used to be. For example, things like when our department is 30% understaffed right now, and HR is 4 to 6 months behind in recruitments, and that's not because they choose to be, it's just there's a lot going on. We don't have the flexibility of bringing other staff in to backfill HR, backfill finance, so things just get really delayed for us. So we're realizing at some point in time we're not probably positioned to be the best long-term administrative services provider. Nonetheless, we enjoy doing it. And so on this chart is the bottom right corner. I like that one extra.
Share?
It was in the slide. I don't know. I'll put it up. Is the fund balance projection. And there's a few things to note in there. I do agree that this year's sales tax projection for next year is probably conservative. Typically, the amounts we get from our consultants are, they err on the side of being a little conservative. We've fudged it in the out years and brought it up to more of a credible forecast level. So in our forecast model, we're bringing up the sales tax revenue, adjusting for what is traditionally a conservative amount. Within PERS, it's a gnarly discussion. So just, again, don't quote me on this math, because I'm not here, I'm not cartel, and I can't spin down how PERS does everything in a very precise model, but I can give you a point of reference. The city's miscellaneous unfunded liability is $102 million. The library percent of miscellaneous is somewhere around 12-13%. So as a percent of the city's total liability, and then you multiply the PERS interest rate on unfunded liability at 7.25%, the library is paying $980,000 in interest a year, roughly. The unfunded billable amount to the library by CalPERS is $1,030,000. So the library is paying $980,000 in interest and $56,000 on principal. That will never be paid off. So that's the concern that we're all seeing at the municipal level. If we don't collectively put pressure on the state to reform how they do investments, and then try to take advantage of portfolio money earning 2% just sitting there and seeing the 7% debt, it's tough to look at that portfolio, and that's the city's lens. We have a diversified portfolio of enterprise funds and other sources that totals about $100 million. And so we like to, instead of parking that money at a 2% rate, like to repurpose that and try to take advantage of reducing our CalPERS rate by 7%. So we're motivated to be active in that space, realizing that it's tough, and we realize you guys are married with us in that transaction. And I think there is a mathematical modeling, Bartel or something like that, we talked about in the past, to bring somebody in to help identify it, with a reasonable level of precision, what is the library share of the city's unfunded liability. And then we can start making those mathematical decisions. If the city goes forward, how do we do that in a way that doesn't mandate that the library must be dragged along? So I recognize that cost impact. We talked about it a lot internally with staff, and I think last year we were hoping we could figure out a mathematical model that if the library opted out, we could honor it. We just could not design that on our own. It's just way too risky. So that's PERS, and again, I respect your decision. From the city's perspective, we're motivated to make that additional pay down, because a principal never, at $56,000 versus the $980,000 interest, if we rely on that type of payoff schedule, we'll never see an end to that. So we're motivated to pay down that principal. I have illegible handwriting, which is a security thing. So people can't read my notes. The budget savings. So the $770,000 that we have factored in for next year's budget isn't in this year's. I mean, this year is, we're trending towards actuals. The 770 we have in next year's is about a 51-49 split between what we anticipate savings in personnel and what we see traditionally savings in operations. When we look back throughout the years, it's more built on trend analysis and where we think we're going forward. There were a couple years in 14 where the library was fully spent in personnel, over by 2%, so they actually consumed all the budget plus a little bit more. The next year they were 98% spent. So we tend to factor that into an average of somewhere around 5 or 6% based on the historical average. Now certainly the operations have more insight into that, and we're just seeing trends in reverse, and they're seeing what's coming in the future. So it is kind of a partnership, but right now, I mean, I don't think any of us can really figure out what's coming ahead and where those savings rates are going to be. I think our instincts are telling us 770 could be higher, and certainly if the 336 CalPERS payment isn't there, that can take you up to $1 million already. So we feel like there's some ability for that savings to be greater, but it's gnarly just hearing. And I have to admit, I've been talking to Susan and Kara and their staff, and they're amazing. And this presentation was fantastic. I'm taking notes on how to do that, and it would really help me just really understand the stresses that the system is seeing, and that's challenging. So I do think there's some flexibility in that savings going up, but it's hard to tell. Will it be 2014 and you use all your savings because we have to have a lot of temps coming on board to backfill things we don't know, or will just our inability of the city to kind of backfill you with recruitments create greater savings than anticipated? Hard to see where that's going. Sales tax. I would say we're concerned with sales tax in that the state has pretty strong surpluses. Federal businesses are doing really well. The library system's main revenue is sales tax. We're concerned at the city level of the base shrinking, more and more taxable goods fading out of the system. We see it on different revenue streams as well, but in sales tax. And the state, at the league, the California cities level, there are committees that have been active for a couple years on reforms. And we're getting closer to traction. There's a few more bills, and every year there's 1 or 2 more assembly members, state assembly members or senators that's willing to sign on to that. But we're not seeing like that hard motivation by the state to reform the sales tax system, which ultimately would provide your sales tax base for the library a more sustainable outward look. So we're nervous. We like to project out credibility, not conservatives in the sales tax. But we are nervous because it's we're certain recession of some type will be coming in the near future, and we're certain that the state may not act to do reforms until things break. So we're just nervous about sales tax over the next 3 or 4 years. So I'll finish there and I can pause for questions or if there's anything I was unclear in. But I think that those graphs do give you at least a view of the latest fund balance projections and where it's at now. I realize that we still have to produce February and March dashboard reports, and we're trying to get there. We're just a little short-handed.
So, can I just follow up? So Jamie had mentioned about the EAs, and I just wanted to raise this again. So the $770,000, when you're projecting your personnel expenses for the EAs and personnel, those are those actual costs based on filled positions and what you're projecting? I'm just worried about double counting.
The EAs are coming largely out of the library, not finance.
Okay.
And they should include actual transactions through January and then estimates for the remainder of the year.
Okay, so if they include actuals to date plus estimates.
Not necessarily to date, it's actuals when we produce the budget forecast and estimates, and that's somewhere around the January timeframe.
But I mean,
So is everyone confident then that we're not double counting savings? Because I'm just worried that this deficit is actually bigger if we're.
No, I think the deficit includes the one-time payment from last year's CalPERS. So I think that's an accurate number.
Okay.
I think that's a good number to look at. It's not going to go, it shouldn't go up. Those
Okay.
are
Just wanted to be
very
certain.
reasonable estimates. And that CalPERS payment, the cash was paid out in last fiscal year, but us GASB accounting people, we were overruled when we were working with the auditors, so that really is a next year cost offset. So they moved it out of last year's into this year despite our recommendation. And so that's where the year shifted for us. Just how you see it in reporting
I'm clear then, so the 17-18 actual, looking at your sheet here, and then the 18-19 projected, the delta in the sort of available fund balance is $700,000. I'm presuming that's due, and we're showing a $700,000 excess beyond budgeted expenditure of personnel, which is also basically equal to the PERS prepayment penalty. So is that enough?
Yeah, 689, I think, was the PERS number.
The prepayment
It feels like
penalty,
the
the PERS
penalty.
prepayment amount.
It feels like the penalty.
Yeah, it does feel like a penalty, doesn't it? So that's what, is that, are you telling me that's what that is? So that was, when we said we were gonna do the PERS prepayment, we knew we were gonna use fund balance.
Yep.
We did use fund balance, I'm seeing it here, and it got carried over to this budget year, and we just didn't have a budget line item, and that accounts for the,
Yep.
And then just one thing on page 21 or 107. I know people don't understand the intra-fund labor credit that's at the bottom. What we do is, if you look at the temporary pay in the EA, it's extra high, and the intra-fund labor credit reduces it to the actual. And what we're doing is shifting pay after the fact to the temp workers. And so it's just a mechanism to shift a temporary worker, if they work at Garfield, when they are paid, then the payment goes to the Garfield cost center. This is the mechanism that allows this to work. But it starts in the temp pool and ends in the cost center.
and it's zeroed out in this revised page 21.
Correct. It's an accounting mechanism in the current year, but by the end of the year, it will all be gone.
It's our best, most efficient way without creating a whole new system of allocating costs in branches. But it does look funny on the face.
Are there any other questions or comments from board members? Okay. So it sounds like we're going to try to...
We have a lot of work to do.
We have a lot of work to do. We're going to schedule, have your staff help us schedule a special meeting for June. We can get our calendars. And we will continue the conversation about the budget.
And I may shift some of my meetings up earlier, so we have more time before that.
I think that would be a good idea. Okay, so that takes us to item 11B, confidentiality.
So one of the things you requested is that we bring the confidentiality process out to a broader group of people. So it's gone through all our internal committees and it went to the library advisory commissions. I think there's been mostly, not substantive changes, but a lot of editorial comments to create clarity and understanding. I know that one board member gave me some notes, which I think too aren't changing substance, but really are trying to clarify the concept of consent. And I'll make those changes, but this is basically our sort of official first reading of this policy then. So you've seen it before.
Okay, are there any questions from board members on the draft policy? Comments from the public? Seeing none, I'll close the public comment hearing. I did forward our director, as she mentioned, several thoughts and comments that I had on it. I just wanted to make sure everybody had an opportunity to hear them. The first one was on the choice and consent section of the policy. And I thought that we could clarify a little bit the distinction that it seems to present between where we talked about personal information for administration of library services and then other personal information. It seems as if there's a distinction there, and I think that could be fleshed out more clearly in that section. And then secondarily, under the patron circulation records, this is something that I've talked about in the past, but do we want to talk about in here that there's an opt-in process? Maybe we don't have it today, maybe we could have it in the future, that the patrons could ask the library to retain their circulation records for purposes of suggesting future books. Because right here it says the library categorically does not. I don't know if that's just going to be a third rail, and if that's a third rail, we would want to think about talking about, a patron favorite list, that the library could voluntarily maintain a favorite list that people could give the library and say, hey, these are my favorite books. go ahead and suggest things down the road to me.
And I do think we have plans to do opt-in, so for me, I think that we haven't clarified that well enough in the policy, if that's true.
Okay. Well, those are the two comments that I have. Did I give everyone a check? Any other comments on this?
Sorry, long meeting.
That's okay.
Okay. So with that, I will adjourn us to a regular meeting. Gonna go up to Boulder Creek next week. All right.
Yay.
June 6th. Thank you all.